So I'll just explain what I wanted to cover today. So as Gary said, my job title here is Head of Careers and Employability, and what that actually means is I head up the Careers and Employability Service here at King's, and actually work with a range of colleagues across the institution who head up other units to actually deliver on the college's employability strategy. Can I just have a show of hands? Are any of you sort of actively involved in careers services or the employability agenda in your own institutions? A little bit, okay. So I'm taking that for most of you this is not the sort of forefront of what you're doing. So what I wanted to do today, in the 20 minutes I've got, is cover a little bit about the context for the employability agenda in the UK. And I'm hoping that some of what I'm going to say will resonate with some of the issues that you're facing in your own institutions, and particularly what your own students and recent graduates are facing. Within that context, I then wanted to come up with a definition of what I and colleagues mean when we talk about employability, and explain why it's become such an important agenda for higher education institutions. And then, having set that national context, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about how we actually deliver on that agenda at King's, so using King's as a case study, if you like. And then after that, I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have. So, I don't know if you can all see this, but these are the kind of media messages that are confronting our students and recent graduates at the moment. There's been a lot of press stories over the last few years about the difficulties that graduates from universities in the UK and across Europe are facing in terms of realising their aspirations and finding that first graduate job. There's some really dire headlines, and if you actually look at some of the Office for National Statistics data in the UK, we're now looking at a situation where about 1 in 4 graduates actually goes into their first job in what would be called a non-graduate position, so a lower skilled job. And this compares to about 10 years ago when it was 1 in 3. So we can see the impact of the recession. And the media message are not only saying that there are fewer jobs out there, they're also saying that competition is intense and that graduates need to make themselves as competitive as they can to actually go into that tough labour market. Now, actually, those of us who work as professional careers consultants and work in the sort of field of labour market information know that this is actually quite a misleading picture. And actually, there are opportunities out there for graduates. But it is true that they need a little bit of support in terms of actually navigating their way through that transition between university and further study or their first job. And that's where I think institutions are under increasing scrutiny to actually demonstrate to the external world and to the public about what they're actually doing to support students in this area. A lot of my role and my team's role is liaising with employers. And actually, they are coming from a different perspective as well. So we have an association of graduate recruiters in the UK, and they've just published their annual winter survey of the sort of state of play in graduate recruitment. And you can see that despite the media messages that there's huge competition out there for graduate jobs, some of our sort of biggest profile graduate recruiters are still investing an awful lot of money in what they somewhat kind of scarily call the war for talent. So trying to attract the best graduates. So we're looking at an average of £88,000 a year spent on marketing their organisations to graduates. And a lot of that marketing is actually spent on on-campus activities. So coming to campuses like King's to promote what they've got to offer and to meet graduates. And I'd be interested to know if it's the same in your country. In the UK, they tend to do a lot of targeting of key institutions. And so part of our jobs for those who work in career services is to make sure that our institution is one of the targeted ones. Now at King's, we're very fortunate. Quite contrary to some of those dire statistics about graduate employment, King's has an extremely high graduate employment rate. So 93.6% of our graduates last year went on to employment or further study. And we do tend to be one of the targeted universities. And these are some of the reasons or criteria against which employers decide which universities to work with and to target. And you'll see that it is things like reputation, the relationships they have with career services or different academic departments, but it's also about the perceived attitude to employability. So whether that institution is seen to be active and dynamic in supporting its graduates, but also working with employers to understand what employers want in terms of employability skills. So when I talk about the employability agenda in the UK, these are the sort of 4 areas that I see as being critical. And again, this might resonate with you and your experiences, or you may think that it's very different in your country. So the first thing, the employability agenda in the UK, for me, it's a student support issue, which is primarily, I think, why I was asked to speak today. So it is about supporting students with that transition, supporting them in the new fee regime in the UK. So they're investing increasing amounts of money in their higher education, and increasingly they are looking for what is the value added that I'm going to get from my higher education experience that is going to set me up for the career that I want, so that I can realise the aspirations that I have. And so increasingly, not only from our students, from the funders of our students, their parents, but also the wider public and from government, we are under increasing scrutiny to show what we're actually doing to help students maximise their university experience beyond the academic curriculum. So linked to that, it's not just a student support issue, it's increasingly becoming a marketing issue. And in the sort of 7.5 years I've worked at King's, attending open days, it's been really noticeable that in the last couple of years, more and more questions are around what kind of job will I get with this degree? What do you do at King's to help me meet employers and find out about the labour market? What kind of opportunities are there for work experience and internships? I think the third thing, and again, I don't know whether this is true across Europe, employability is increasingly becoming an institutional positioning issue. So for example, in the UK, in some of our national newspaper-based league tables, graduate prospects data, so the first destinations data for graduates, actually forms 1/4 of the league table position for subject-based league tables. So increasingly, where we're actually regarded and our position in league tables and how the outside world sees us is linked to not only what we deliver in terms of the educational experience, but also in terms of what we're actually doing around employability. And finally, it is linked up with a political dimension in the UK around a big lot of dialogue around the knowledge economy, return on investment for higher education, and the perennial issue of the skills gap between what we are producing as higher education institutions. So that's the agenda in the UK. And so it's becoming increasingly important that we think about employability, and it's becoming a cross-institutional issue. So whereas maybe 10 years ago it was something that career services cared very much about, it's now something that the whole institution cares about and is working hard to deliver on. So having set the scene, so what is employability? It's a word that's increasingly used, particularly in UK dialogue. But what do we mean? Now, some people, I think, equate employability with employment. So for them, it means, is a graduate getting a good job? For me, that's part of the picture, but it's quite a reductive approach, because I think it's not just about the first tangible outcome. It's about whether the graduate actually has the skills, the aptitude, the awareness of the labour market to not just get their first job, but to carry on and continue through their career and actually manage their career effectively, so that they're actually getting a satisfying career. A lot of employers will see employability as, has this person got the skills that I need for the role I'm recruiting for? And again, although we spend a lot of time trying to help students understand what employers are looking for in terms of skills, that's also a fairly reductive approach, because I think if we just see employability as skills, we're missing the whole piece around attitude and behavioural competency and knowledge. So all the things that a student needs to be able to effectively manage their career. And that's often seeing the transferability of their skills and knowledge from one organisation to another. So I quite like this definition, which will get sent round with the slides. This is from an academic called York Mance, who's done a lot of work around employability. And he says employability is a set of achievements. So by that he means a set of skills, understandings and personal attributes that make graduates more likely to gain employment and to be successful in their chosen occupation, which benefits themselves, the workforce, the community and the economy. So we're talking about quite a wide-ranging aspiration. I've tried to break down what I've called the employability spectrum. So when I'm talking about employability with students or with colleagues, this is what I mean. And I've come up with 6 different areas to try and mitigate against this reductive approach. So on the left-hand side, we've got what I would call career confidence or self-efficacy. And I think the career bit is one thing, but it's effectively about student self-efficacy, the sorts of reasons why a lot of them come to higher education, to actually learn about themselves, feel more confident about their place in the world. And I think that for some of our students is the platform, and we need to do a lot of work around that to help them realise their potential. The second main tranche of employability is around skills, so helping students to understand what skills they are developing and how they might translate the language that they've been using in academia to how an employer might talk about those skills. So an example might be working with a postgraduate research student who talks in the language of a research thesis. To an employer, that makes very little sense. So our role is to help that student understand that actually what they've also been developing through that research thesis is project management skills. And for some of them, teamworking skills for sort of lab-based projects. And those are some of the skills language that an employer would understand. So increasingly our role is about translation and skills development. The third area is about opportunity awareness, so understanding the labour market. And this is where we're fighting quite hard to help students look beyond the media messages and actually go and find out about the reality of any particular sector that they're interested in. The fourth area, which I think taps into some of the other themes that you'll hear about today, is around career capital, so connections, networking, understanding how to navigate your way through the labour market. So it's not just about information, but it's about talking to the right people. And I think those of us who are dealing with large institutions with a large spectrum of students coming in from different starting points, anything we can do to help students develop their career capital and to develop their networks is actually going to give them a strong start. There were 2 other areas I came up with. One which we're placing increasing emphasis on here at King's is around experiential work-based learning. So that can take the form of formalised internships, informal work experience, mentoring, shadowing, anything that allows the student to actually put some of their learning into context and actually engage with professional environments. And finally, something that I would work on particularly as a career professional is career management skills. So having an awareness of what you need to do to plan your career. And that's everything from self-insight and planning through to the sort of practicalities of job hunting, putting a CV together, doing an effective interview. So for us, that's the sort of spectrum of activity that we're trying to deliver on at King's. So given all of that context, what I wanted to do quickly is just give a few reflections from my own perspective and my experience at King's and a couple of other institutions about key things that I think are important if you're trying to deliver on an employability agenda and actually support your students effectively. And then I'm going to give King's as an example. So I've got 5 things that I think are critical if you're going to deliver effectively on employability. The first one is to be clear about your definition. In the UK, at least, employability has become a buzzword almost. And the more people you speak to around an institution, the more you realise that people can have very different conceptions about what employability is. So I think it starts with some dialogue across your institution so that everybody has a clear idea about what we are defining as employability within the context of our institution. The second thing is to think about the core mission of your own institution and how it relates to any potential employability agenda. So for example, at King's, we are a research-focused university and we have certain core missions which include activities that are in the service of society. So our employability agenda has to fit that broader agenda. And then it's about outcomes. So mission is one thing, but outcomes are the next thing. So what are the outcomes and how are you going to measure them for any kind of employability agenda? And that can be very difficult because students can take a long time after they leave an institution to settle into their career. And those of you who, like the UK, gather data on the destinations of graduates will know that it's a difficult thing to make the impact link between what you're doing in an institution and the actual data around graduate destinations longer term. The third thing I would suggest is always a good thing to do, is to map the existing activity across your institution to find out what is already there and to avoid any duplication. I think this can avoid sort of what I would call mission or initiative fatigue. So people suddenly setting up a lot of new projects under the banner of employability and then realising that someone else in the institution is already acting on that or delivering on that. The fourth thing is governance. So establishing strong leadership and accountability across the institution for the different components of employability so that everybody is clear about who's delivering on what and who is accountable to whom. And then the final fifth thing is communication and collaboration. So if you're in an institution the size of King's, half the battle is making sure that everybody keeps communicating and working collaboratively in an institution our size. So, what does that mean for us at King's? I'll give you a very quick case study and then I'll invite questions. We've got 6 strands to our college employability at King's. The first one is about curriculum learning. So trying to make sure that all of our students, as part of their programme of learning, their academic programme, actually do get some career-based learning as well. Now, at King's, this is not necessarily accredited. So unlike several other UK higher education institutions, we don't have a lot of formalised accredited modules around career learning, but we do try to make sure that whatever discipline the student is studying, that they do get an opportunity to think about career issues. The second strand is around co-curricular activities, and there's lots and lots of units across King's that are working on this. One of the things that we're doing in the Careers and Employability Service is running a professional skills programme. So this is a 10-week programme which is actually co-delivered with employers. So each session is delivered by a career professional and an employer to actually look at some of these skill areas that are asked for of graduates by most employers. So things like communication, team working, leadership, analytical thinking and problem solving. So that through those sessions we can unpack the skill, the employer can talk about what they would expect to see in a recent graduate and the sorts of things they look for when they're hiring, and we as the careers professionals can help the student to actually reflect on their strengths, identify areas of weakness and start to be able to explain to a future employer where their strengths lie in those skill areas. The third area is about work relevant learning, and we have a very sort of active process of trying to help students find internships and work experience, whether accredited or non-accredited. So some of those are formalised placements as part of somebody's programme of study. A lot of them are students coming to the Careers and Employability Service and us helping them to identify, source and apply for something that will help them on their CV, will help them explore the labour market. The fourth area is access to careers information and alumni and employers. So just actually putting them in touch with good quality information. I won't go into this in detail, but we do a lot of work around bringing employers onto campus through different events, connecting alumni with current students through mentoring programs, and actually making sure that they have access to good quality online and paper-based careers information. And then the final area is about self-development and appraisal. So opportunities through which the student can take time out to reflect on what they want from their career, what they've gained already from King's and what the next steps might be. And some of that is channelled through the careers service. Quite a lot of it is actually done through things like the personal tutor programme and other sort of opportunities for the student to go through that reflective process. I think that was everything I was going to cover. I won't go into any more detail about the specifics because they're on the slides and I think it would take a long time to talk through. But if you are interested in some of the things we actually do in the Careers Service to deliver on that, our events programme, our professional skills programme, I'm very happy to send details to you afterwards. I've also got a slide which has some further reading, so if you're interested in the definitions of employability and how the dialogue has developed in the UK, then there's some research links there as well.